Final score at Ibrox, Celtic 0, Rangers 3. And if truth be told, Celtic just never got going in the New Year derby. Not sure why, but that's why Paddy's here to give me all the answers that I don't have at this moment in time. This is Tino with the show. Paddy, your initial response to yesterday's defeat?
Yeah, hi Tino, hi viewers and listeners. I just a really poor performance from us all round. I think we got off to a not bad 5-minute start. I think the manager touched on that, and then I don't know. I think a few just got a little bit overwhelmed with the occasion, and it's a really nice reflecting moment for them. I've dropped off here, but it looks of it. Not see me back on now. A real nice moment of reflection for the team as well. I think comes at a good time. Some important fixtures coming up in January, as we've spoke about. And sometimes this is what a manager needs, but sometimes this is what some of our key players need as well. I'd say only one player leaves Ibrox with their head held high yesterday, and Cameron Carter-Vickers. I don't think there's much Kasper Schmeichel could do yesterday as well. But yeah, a few people need to have a look at their performance yesterday and ask why it went wrong. Am I at the level required? I do think there's a few in that team that are not. So it's came at a good time in the sense of the transfer window starting as well, and gives the board some things to think about too.
Yeah, and there's plenty of negatives, plenty of concerns, and we'll certainly go through all of them in the next half hour or so. But there's also, you need to take positives and you need to take learnings in defeat. You learn far more about yourself in defeat than you do at any other time. When you're coasting 4-0 at St Johnstone and Motherwell and all those things, it's good, enjoyable. You don't learn too much about yourself, certainly in terms of character and, sometimes what it takes football in the face of adversity. So we'll try and catch all of that and then some. Paddy, I guess there's a few key questions, and we'd put something out last night on Twitter or on social just asking kind of 3 general statements. Where at that time, certainly I felt we've got it more strong on the day. And I'll start with the first point or the first question, and it's a start. And is this all with hindsight? And I guess we'll get to that as well. But did he get the starting 11 wrong? And if so, who else could he or should he have started?
I think that team is capable of beating Rangers. It's done it in the past. And I think that, you can talk about players being in form, players being out of form, players just being off the boil a little. But the team that played yesterday has done it in the past. They know what it takes. I would say that it's been possibly a little bit of a blow in terms of the plans for the week that Engels had to drop out in the morning. I'm not buying the whole if you're fit enough to go on the bench, you're fit enough to start pattern. I think that it's been a loss at the 11th hour for us that he's not been able to start and going to complete the 90 minutes. And I also think it threw up the old question of Liam Scales and Greg Taylor for us as well. I think that if we've got 2 players there that are just not comfortable in the occasion at points, because I've definitely seen both of them show up in these games as well. But if they're not comfortable in playing that forward pass, which Rangers were very, very clever in cutting out yesterday with playing Bayrami in between in the 10, then that's when you really need to see, right, what does Celtic do in this case? Do we try and upgrade in those positions? Because you can't tell me that Austin Trussey's just sitting there for the sake of it and Liam Scales is a marker for who needs to come in. And we've had the Greg Taylor debate for quite a while now. I'm not just talking about this season, but we look at the performances in different competitions, especially in Europe, where it's not worked out for him at all. So not being too negative on it, I'm just trying to be real on it. I think that they're the key areas for us yesterday. And then you're asking a lot from the likes of Rio Hatate, Daisen Maeda, when you're playing balls into them with their backs to goal. You're not really giving them anything to run on to. It's all very rushed. So Rangers brought the pressure points out in 2 of our weakest players, in my opinion, and that's where they got the success yesterday.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to that. And we'll get into the system, just as you've touched on there, Paddy, just shortly, because it's so relevant in terms of personnel, but it's what you do with that personnel. But I totally agree with you in terms of the 11 that started are good enough to go and beat Rangers. Beat Rangers more or less, the same players have been there and done that. And I think it's massively with the benefit of hindsight that we can all say he got the team wrong. I really don't think he did get it wrong. You could debate, would Baye have started over Greg Taylor? I think we're unfortunate that Engels did take on well. What you're going to take out Kyogo, the guy that scored 8 goals against Rangers, various things. So, we're all an expert after the fact. But I think the team that started have proven themselves to be capable of beating Rangers. In terms of the system, so my question there, you've touched on the fact that Rangers, as they've done in the cup final, they've adopted, what's termed a mid-block. They're happy to let us bring the ball up to the halfway line, slightly beyond, and at that point they then engage and then they start to press. And as we see in the cup final, we have struggled to deal with that for whatever reason. Under Paddy, my next question is, have we become too reliant on the wingers? So you mentioned Nicholas Kuhn and Dies Maeda, who, amongst others, had real off days yesterday. Have we become too reliant, and do we lack a wee bit of creativity, in the centre of the pitch? Do we miss a number 10 on a day like that?
I still think that just the system that we play with 3 players, that attacking players, that they're not going to be winning the aerial battle. So we really need to utilise our wingers. Whether that involves Celtic coming in a bit narrower, then you just end up in a bit of a muddled game. We like to keep it as wide as we can against teams that we should have the pace to go and pick off. But they've been clever. I'm seeing a lot of people saying that this team were a better team in the cup final. I'm not having that argument at all. I think that was 2 teams figuring each other out. But what Rangers done differently was nullify the wingers, and they've done it successfully. I'm not having the idea that we don't know, we've not changed our system. Why should we change our system? That's a team that's been unbeaten for 33 domestic games. I just think it's been a day where what we've hoped to do hasn't paid off. I think that they've got in our faces a little bit quicker than we're normally used to, and it's spooked a couple of players. And that's where you need to ask, is it the system or is it the level of player that we have playing in that system? And I think it's the latter.
Yeah, I can hear just how upset your cat is in the background as well.
Listen, if she gets going here, we're in for a really raucous show. She's not going to shut up.
In for a treat. We'll see how it goes. Couple of other things. So in terms of Rangers allowing us the ball, Celtic is 61% possession. But I always say this, we'll talk at different times about possession stats and other stats. The general matters is the one that's usually in the top left corner of your screen, and it tells you the goal scored, and Celtic didn't have an impact on that on the day. Callum McGregor, so a lot of chat around him right now. Celtic played without him from the start against St Johnstone in the previous game. It was quite a fluid midfield. But a game at home against St Johnstone, bottom of the table, St Johnstone, is very different from going to Ibrox, and you couldn't possibly not start with your captain there. So I stick with that. But do you feel he was isolated there, Paddy? He's sitting there, he's not as physical, he's nearly 32, so just that plays a part. He's maybe not as able to get around the park in the way that he used to.
Yeah.
And you can look at all the goals, but you can certainly look at the first goal. It's about in the centre of Celtic's midfield at that point, and I think Callum McGregor could have done with a wee bit of support at that time in the game.
I would agree with you, mate. I'm going to take this spectator out, and it'll just be 10 seconds.
Don't worry, I'll go to some comments in the meantime. There's some good comments.
Point across, as you can see.
Some good comments coming in from various folks. We've got Jerry O'Donnell, Gypsy King, Jerry Sale, Pat McLaughlin, Steve Letford, Mazar, Paul Allen. Great to see a lot of you guys join us here today, despite yesterday's tough result. I'll go to Jerry's comment, Jerry O'Donnell. Happy New Year, guys. And Jerry's opinion, we need a couple of powerful midfielders, Paddy, just like I've talked, who can win those tackles and chase back. He thinks that the manager did play his best team apart from the centre-back position. But we'll stay on the midfield just now. Do you feel that, we've spoken about the fact that in Europe we could do with the 2 defensive midfielders, double pivot, call it what you want. And I think there's an argument for utilising that in the Champions League. Less so for the majority of domestic games. Go to Ibrox at least twice in your your season. And I'd say maybe that's a place to deploy the 2 sitting midfielders.
But then, I think I can see the argument for it in terms of how they're setting up. But I feel that they're trying to nullify our game. They're not bringing an attacking threat in that sense. Their low block was a mid block against us yesterday, and they took the risk. They took the risk to push it up that little bit further. I know that if we had the time in the ball and we had the patience in the ball, we would get in behind them at points. We've seen that with a disallowed goal. The game was screaming out for those kind of passes, but again, I just think there was a few that just weren't up to the level required that prevented that from happening. And I do think it stems from us playing out from the back. It's been a massive feature in how we play football. It's not going to change. That is our identity. Under Rodgers in the first spell, It's got even stronger since Ange came in as well. I don't think we changed that. We're lumping it long in the hope of 3 players up the top that have got none of them have got the height to try and compete at that level as well. So I don't think we need to change there. If you're not getting the ball out quick enough to your 3 midfielders, you're putting yourself under pressure for the get-go. And I just think that's what Celtic have done yesterday. You look at the possession we've had yesterday, as you said, 60%. It's typical games where we've played in Europe before and teams allow our backline to have the ball. There's a big reason for that. And I think that left-hand side is targeted also often. And I'm sticking on that. I think that's where our big issue came from yesterday. I'm not too worried about our midfielders. Yes, Rio Hatate wasn't great. Paulo Bernardo wasn't great. And I just think that Callum McGregor was marked out of the game. But if we're not getting the ball out to our midfielders quick enough, they can't do much. They can't do much to bring McGregor into it. They can't do much to bring their wingers into it. And that's where we fell down, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's spot on, and I'd scribbled it down. Not getting the ball to the midfielders quick enough is an issue. So what we've seen was almost a repeat performance in terms of the time that Carter Vickers got. At one point, maybe at 1-0 down, must have been at 1-0 down, Carter Vickers picked up the ball fairly deep inside the Celtic half, and before you know it, he was midway into the Rangers. He'd done a couple of turns, and before you know it, he was way out of position and high up the park. And that's because he did have a good game. He's the one guy, and you could argue that Schmeichel done what he had to do, in terms of pass marks in the game.
Yeah.
But we always talk about taking 3, 4, 5 touches to do something that you could and should be doing in 1 and 2. It is really quite stifling for this Celtic team. And if Scales and Carter Vickers can't get it out to Callum McGregor, Rio Hatate and Paulo Bernardo quicker, then we get what we got. And I think just being basic about it. Liam Scales, I think, is a good backs to the wall defender. We'll go on to his mistakes shortly.
Yeah.
Carter Vickers is a brilliant defender, and he had some big moments in the game which maybe prevent from being more than what it was. But they are not ball players in the truest sense, and they'll have come through their whole career, including whatever they've done as kids, in youth football and academy football. They will have been defenders all day long. You get guys like Greg Taylor, who played a wee bit of midfield at one point, and Luke McCown was a winger at one point, now he's a midfielder. Cameron Carter Vickers, I would bet that he was never a right winger or a number 10, and you can add the same for Liam Scales. They're just not those type of players. What they are is good defenders. So if you're Rangers or Zagreb or Bruges, why wouldn't you just leave them on the ball? Because they're of Celtic's 10 outfield players, they're the 2 least likely to hurt you. Greg Taylor can play a bit of ball. Alistair Johnson, when on form, can play a bit of ball, and everything further up the field than that, we know we've got real creativity. Those 2 guys aren't it. So, position point of view, of course you would leave them on the ball, because you know that if you invite them on, they're not the guys that are going to find the killer pass. And I think that, as much as else that went on yesterday, is something that really hurt Celtic.
Yeah, listen, it is, and I think, as I say, there's people saying, Kyogo done nothing, Hatate and Bernardo weren't involved, and our 2 wingers were pretty non-existent. But I think what we've got to look at as a collective, we were disjointed. And you speak about the mazy runs from Cameron and Carter Vickers. I think he had a couple. Again, that's just coming from the point of when my midfielder hasn't got into the place, or the ball's been too late to pass it to him. I've not got the McGregor option because he's getting marked out of the game. So this is where a manager comes in terms of he needs to address that. But I do think that he plays a very, very strong system. We've seen it work successfully. We've seen it pay off for us time and time again against Rangers. We've seen it against Leipzig this season. But ultimately, if you continue to set it up that way, people are going to try different things against you. Now, what we lacked yesterday was just that, someone taking the game of the scruff of the neck for us. I think that's been a massive part in it. And I think someone being comfortable and confident on the ball in order to play those passes quicker and then start to break their lines down. I think that little spell at the beginning of the second half, we started to do that a little bit. We started to be a bit more comfortable. They were man for man yesterday, Tino. So that shows you the basics of how they're setting up against us. I just think we needed a little bit more bravery in the ball. We just didn't see it. It's fine. And these games are going to come.
Yeah, do you know, certainly a bit more bravery, a bit more creativity. From a Rangers point of view, they deserve the win, and they got their system right on the day, and all of that kind of stuff. But it was no masterclass. It was do the basics and do them well and show a bit more desire and a bit more hunger. And I always think, when another team does that, maybe no away fans at Ibrox can play a factor in that, and that can spook some players. I'd like to think they've got more character than that, and they've shown at times in the past that they do have. But in terms of the system, I'm asking the question, and we're discussing it here. The system is the system that has saw fit enough that we only lost 2 games in 52 games, I think, in the calendar year 2024. It's the system that saw us go on a 34-game unbeaten run. So it would be mad to change that system until something goes wrong. And you'd argue that obviously yesterday, less so the cup final, because I'm the same as you. I don't buy a narrative that we were lucky on the cup final. But yesterday it did go wrong. And that's fine. Now and then it's going to go wrong. Brendan Rodgers will make mistakes. Players will make mistakes. Everyone will make mistakes. The most important thing now is what Brendan Rodgers does about it. Because if he then just shows the same system every time we play Rangers, we'll play them at least 2 more times in maybe a Scottish Cup game, then we need to make sure that we learn. But I think we know that Brendan Rodgers, whatever you think of him, is tactically astute, tactically very, very there. And they'll be doing the analysis probably right now, probably today anyway. They'll be looking at where it went wrong. And I trust him, the manager, to find the answers. That's his job. And I think we've seen that he knows how to make tweaks. What is reassuring for me is the lessons learned against Dortmund. Dortmund was seriously painful.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do a couple of things. You can cry about it and lick your wounds and feel sorry for yourself, or you can actually go and address it. And I thought the next big opportunity to show what he'd learned was against Atlanta. I thought it was really impressive. That was a really mature performance. And I think a lot of people are forgetting all these performances, and very quickly with all the credit that this manager and this group of players rightly deserves. But at the same time, it's okay to be angry about what happened yesterday. But you've got to understand that there's so much good up till yesterday. And if there's ever a time to lose that game, and I'd prefer it to be never, but if there ever is a time, then it's got to be when you're 14 points ahead. Let me ask you just on that, Paddy, about motivation and human nature. If Celtic had been 6 points ahead or 9 points ahead or whatever, I think you go into that different than 14 points ahead. Now, I don't think it was a conscious move, but subconsciously, surely you take your foot off the gas a wee bit. I don't think anyone went out there and didn't try. I just think in your head you go, this doesn't really matter. We're 14 clear. Does that kick in at some point?
It really shouldn't at that level, in my opinion.
I know it shouldn't.
I know where you're coming from, and I think actually the manager kind of alluding to that a little in his interview after the game yesterday. That will definitely be his thinking towards the players' mindset, but I don't think he'll be letting them away with it. It reminded me of that kind of game. You remember that Ange game where they beat us 3-0, and everything was kind of the tools were down. We were just getting ourselves ready for the Scottish Cup final. I think a few heads were on the beaches at that point. But for me, yes, it's an incredible testament to a brilliant start to the season where we're at. I don't think it's panic stations like some are maybe alluding to, but I can definitely understand that it's an embarrassing game yesterday. I wouldn't discount that. But I just think we need to take a little bit of perspective and look at the position we're in. However, I want my players showing up and beating Rangers every time. I want my players showing up and beating anyone every time. I think we need to keep that mentality strong. And it is, listen, if there is any positives, it's just like what you've said. It's address the wrongs, address the problems that we've seen yesterday, and already looks like we're kind of on the roads to doing that in terms of the chat with Kieran Tierney. But for me, like it's a nice wake up call, because we've got such an important game coming up against Young Boys in a couple of weeks, and we need to wake up for that. That's such an important game for us.
Yeah, it's a massive game, and it's important that we take the lessons and move on pretty sharp. Let me ask you just another question, Paddy. It feels like I'm just putting you in the spot, but I'm okay with it if you are. The accusation of arrogance from Brendan Rodgers. Now, there's folks saying that it was arrogant not to learn from the cup final and the way Rangers approached. And I can see where people are coming from that, but arrogance is the right word. Again, I'll go back to it. If you've played a system that's put you in pretty good shape for 34 games domestically, 52 games by and large over 2024, then I don't think it's arrogant to stick with what's been working. I think it's normal and right to stick with what's been working. And someone makes the point, if a manager believes in his system, I like a manager to have a real steadfast belief in what they're doing. Ange's absolutely got that. Brendan Rodgers has got that. A guy like Martin O'Neill would have that. Various kind of big figures in Celtic history. All managers have got their philosophies and beliefs, and if they just throw that out every time, a poor result comes around, then they wouldn't get to the positions that they generally get to, these kind of elite level managers. Someone made the very good point that Martin O'Neill came in and changed everything for Celtic at that time, at the turn of the century. He was and is huge for Celtic. He was just so important to the modern Celtic. But people will forget, or some people will forget, that as much as he beat Rangers 6-2 early bells that season, he also lost 5-1 to Rangers that season.
Yeah.
But that's fine, because there's a bigger picture at play. And I think to a large extent, there's a bigger picture at play here. I've been fairly dismissive of Celtic's draw with Dundee United recently, which was on the 22nd of December, because if Celtic got to win the treble, and I think they will win the treble, if Celtic got to do that, no one cares about the 22nd of December. And nobody cares about the game that Rangers beat us, that brought them to 11 points of us. So I think there's a lot at play, but I buy into the arrogance, quote-unquote arrogance from the manager. I just think it's a manager who played a system that he believes in and that served him pretty well up until...
Yeah, I think so. And listen, I can take that for what it's worth in terms of we are going to have these games. It's how we react after. I think that's the massive bit. I'm seeing some of the comments, I think, from Mona Permo talking about the midfield getting bullied off the ball. I think fair comments. I'm not in any way saying that the midfield got off lightly yesterday. We need to be a bit more braver, as I've mentioned. But if you're receiving the ball too late and a player's on you too quick, then you've got limited time. And I think that it does start from the back for me. I don't think anyone gets past marks yesterday. There's no defence of Rio Hatate. There's no defence of Paulo Bernardo. I thought at points they were hiding for our centre-halves as well. But the mood is set from how we start to play from the very get-go. And if we allow that pressure on and we don't sort it out, then not everyone's going to wake up. And if you see players start to feel the occasion too much, then that's the big issue that our players faced yesterday and really struggled to get a hold of. So I don't think it's just a midfield three at all yesterday. I think it starts from the back, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that leads me to the next big question for you, Paddy. Before I do ask that, again, a big thanks to everyone who's here in the live. Some brilliant numbers, and thanks for the various comments coming in. Ona Permo, good to see him here. He's just become a member of the channel. And remember, you do need to be a member. Comment on the live pre and post match shows that we do. The link to do so is in the show notes, so please do check that out when you get a chance. Paddy, where I would see there's potentially a bit of arrogance from the manager, if that's the right word, and I'm not sure it is his reluctance to make changes sooner. Now, I'm not ever one for making changes in the first half. I think it can be quite dangerous to the players' what's the word? The confidence levels of a player who might get hooked within the first half. I think they've got to be very careful with that. And actually, taking off one of our players in the first half would have given the Rangers crowd a lift. I don't think that would have been the move. But halftime might have been the move for me. And we've mentioned bits of Rio Hatate, who was just not having a day at all. Liam Scales, who made some pretty big errors, and we'll cover them with the goals. Do you think he should have rung the changes at halftime, or would it have been the challenge laying down the marker to those who had put in the first 45 to say, you need to go out and address that?
Again, what kind of game are they coming into? I think for me, it's, I looked at Scales coming in for Trusty in the League Cup final. We were all, I think, crying for Greg Taylor to be taken off. I could see the thinking in it in terms of maybe it's the outlet that maybe there needs to be quicker passing out to Taylor. But I don't know if it has a greater impact. I think when you look at the timing of the three changes yesterday, it was still 1-0, and they go and get the second, probably just that these guys are getting onto the park as well, so that it's not too long after they go and grab the second goal. I think it's a tough one on that. 1-0 isn't catastrophic. You've got a half-time team talk to try and get the players back in it. So I don't think we need to be too knee-jerk at all times with these things. And I wouldn't say it's arrogance. Thought it was strange to bring Engels on so late, but he must not have been anywhere near the fitness required if that's been the case, which at that point, why is he on the bench?
Yeah, I mean, I think Engels was in the plan. I think due to start, and if the league team is to be believed, which it usually is at the moment, he was in the lineup, but he's flagged up unwell on yesterday morning, and the managers obviously thought that he can't start with him, and maybe he just didn't have much in the tank. I thought he'd done okay when he came on, actually, and we'll never know, what could have happened had he started the game. I thought he was in a good position mentally to start the game, given that he was in the 2 previous games, but it wasn't to be. Let's cover the goals, because it's important to kind of skip by them, and I suppose we need to take our medicine as much as anybody else.
Absolutely.
But Liam Scales has played for the first goal. You're 6 minutes in, and the chat was, if Celtic could get an early goal, it would really silence the crowd, and it could have been a very different affair. But instead, we go the opposite way, and Liam Scales gifts into that big gap in the midfield where I mentioned that McGregor wasn't getting on it. Then we were all at sea. Paulo Bernardo had what I would describe as a fairly weak attempt to get the ball back off Raskin, and then before you know it, it breaks to Hadji, and it's a good finish. At first, I thought the goalie might have been at fault. I've seen a pretty decent angle from behind the goal, and I wouldn't blame the goalie, but it's cheap. And as we'll get to with the next 2 goals, all goals come from our errors, and that's the big frustration. You can always accept if you come up against a better side and they cut you apart and score good goals. Put the pause up and accept that. That wasn't the case yesterday, but that early error, whatever it was, 6 minutes in from Scales, kind of set the tone.
Yeah, and it does. But in these moments, that's where we need to be alert. And seen some really good comments online saying we used to go into these games and take the game to the opposition pretty quick from the get-go. We have started a little bit on our back foot over the last few weeks. I don't think there's any doubts about that. And again, it just, like you say, it just looks like a half-assed attempt for Bernardo, and he's just allowed Raskin to bounce off him. Raskin's got the momentum, but he's still putting enough to put the player off, and they're just that fight, that anger towards it wasn't there. There wasn't enough aggression at all. And then, listen, it's a good finish from Hadji, but we've got Carter Vickers has got back next to him. It's been under his legs, and it's just, I'm not blaming the keeper for that. It's right into the bottom corner. So it's a good goal from them, but I do think it stems from a mistake from Scales and stems from a mistake from Bernardo. So there is ways of stopping that in relatively easy ways. So yeah, definitely it puts some of the players on a downer, puts them into a worried state, as it did with Liam Scales.
Yeah, and I also think, I say that, but yellow cards are part of the game. And if Paulo Bernardo needs to take a yellow card early in the game as it is to break up play, then do so. In fact, the chance of yellow 6 minutes in, if you're just a wee bit naughty, is pretty slim. You can probably get away with just putting one on Raskin, retreating and letting him take a free kick and starting again. So he's a young player, he'll learn, and he'll probably be kicking himself for not doing so earlier. There is another big chance, so we'll skip into the second half, and it's the one where Tierney hits the post. Again, it's Liam Scales. Having watched it back, Liam Scales gifts it cheaply into the middle of the park again. We're lucky to get away with it, but it leads to a corner. Scales eventually gets back and puts it out for the corner. And then for somebody not to pick up Raskin, what's Raskin, 4'6" or something, and nobody's picked him up in the box. I think maybe Maeda, but it's hard to tell. But you do have to ask at that point, Celtic must work on their set pieces, defending and attacking. So they must know at corners what the setup is. Any time a sub comes in, you'll see Gavin Strachan or somebody with the board or the iPad or whatever showing folks where they need to be at set pieces. So there's no doubt that everyone knew or should have known where to be. But for some reason, atmosphere, pressure, whatever, we've switched off, and that's not acceptable, Paddy. Everything else that's going on that we're discussing here, personnel, systems, all that's no excuse for not, knowing what to do when defending a corner, is there?
No, it's poor. And then, listen, I know it's a difficult one for even Vickers to react to it back, but their player reacted. We just didn't seem to be on our toes for it at all. I think that's what we kind of seen from a lot of players yesterday, and I've seen a comment about the mentality about going to Ibrox. You need to want it. You really do when you go into that game, especially if you go and lose the lead early. You really need to want it. I think we go back to previous seasons. I remember a great game where Scott Brown took a yellow card, almost just to wake the team up a bit, used it as a bit of momentum for them. I didn't see anyone really wanting to put that aggression into the game yesterday, and I think we fell short because of that. We looked a little lost. So I think when you're setting up for corners, you want to win that. You want the ball at every opportunity. Your job is to make sure no one's getting to that ball before you when it's swung in. And they just looked flat-footed. They looked as if they were reactive instead of proactive team.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's exactly what happens. Ryan somehow wins a header in the box. I think it's either that clears it off the line and then it's Proper who's first to react. And again, I don't think there's any excuses for guys reacting quicker than you. He actually had a time and a bit of space just to smash it into the net. So that's the way that one went. And let's just cover the third goal while we're doing all of this in one fell swoop. It's Alistair Johnson who's played a perfectly fine pass into Luke McCowan. Johnson's passing was off all day.
Yeah.
He's not a guy that should get spooked by the occasion. I think he made his debut at Ibrox actually years ago, probably about 2 years ago in January. And he just didn't have a day at all. But he did, on that occasion, put the ball into Luke McCowan, who's just been waiting on it. He's back to goal and he's not been big enough. Luke McCowan's not the tallest guy, but he's usually strong and his awareness is good. He knows what's happening behind him. He didn't on that occasion, and he's not long on the park, so I'll give him that bit of leeway. But it's a mistake, and he'll learn from it. I think from what we've seen and heard from Luke McCowan is he will take that on board and ensure that doesn't happen again. But it is a bad mistake in the game, and you find Chef Gibrahim again. Carter Vickers is. You need to give him credit. He's valiant in his attempts to snuff out these attacks, and he's got across to make the block. But given it just falls perfectly for Danilo. He tucks it away and you're up the road. And at 2-0, you think, despite how poorly we're playing, you could still potentially get back into it because we know what Celtic are capable of. 3-0, forget it, and it's game over, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. And as I say, like the one opportunity we managed to get into a comfortable position and play that ball in behind, we score from it with Kyogo, and obviously the goal getting chopped off is the bit for us where we should smell a bit of blood in terms of, hey, listen, that's how it's done, that's how we get in behind. But the operation and getting the ball into the middle of the park, the players in the middle of the park wanted to take the ball on the half turn, just non-existent yesterday. It's a day to forget, absolutely. But I don't think a manager forgets it too quickly. I don't think he lets the players forget it too quickly. But as a supporters, I think we just need to take it in the chin. Yeah,
I'm all for that. And I think we can let the manager and the players do what they need to do. They'll do the analysis, as I say today, maybe to go ahead of starting on Sunday. But I think we need to just get our head around it. And I'm not going to cheapen it by saying I wasn't that bothered yesterday. I was, of course, yeah, and that game is always important, no matter what's going on. But when you take a step back, the game wasn't any fun, but when you take a step back, you can look at it. I mean, I'll ask you quickly, Paddy, is the title race back on?
I don't think it is. That's where I'm at with it. However, what I would say is that these games are just a nice reminder for how hard it is to go and win a league title. And it is a nice reminder for the players of, you're not over the line yet. So I think what we've done this season already after that mauling in Dortmund was reset. I think it's came at a good time, and I hope that the players do react to it. But as I say, it falling at the beginning of a transfer window is a nice time for a manager as well.
Yeah, agreed. And you wouldn't ever choose a defeat like that yesterday. But if there is a time to choose it, it's when you're 14 clear and when you're in a month where you can directly do something about it. Rumours, most of us tuning in here will have seen that rumours are ramping up about Kieran Tierney. Fabrizio Romano, who's really young, he's the big transfer guy. He's put a couple of tweets out today saying that talks are now on the go. I'd love it, Paddy. I think it'd be a great move. And I seen a tweet last night, and it was from somebody saying, if anyone thinks Kieran Tierney and don't get into this Celtic team, then they're sadly mistaken, because there's people arguing about, I don't know if Jota will happen, right? But people were saying, Jota, where does he fit in? You play him over Maeda? I mean, yes, you do. And I love Dyson Maeda, I really do. But you just got to look at these individually. Kieran Tierney, do you play him ahead of Greg Taylor? Yes, you do. If fit and all these kind of things. So I think if Celtic are able to bring in guys that improve the team, improve the key positions, then I think it could be a really important month. And I don't know, I'd like to think that whatever the scoreline was at Ibrox, the moves that Celtic have got in place this month would remain. I don't think you can be as reactive at one bad result. You go, oh, do you know what? We need this, that, and the next thing. I'd like to think that Rodgers and Paul Tisdale and whoever now makes the calls have sat in recent weeks, if not recent months, and just outlined what's required, regardless of the 2nd of January. And I'd like to think that work's ongoing and that we make these key additions, because out with anything else, Paddy, a couple of new guys, say it is 2 or maybe even 3 new additions. Of course, it's great to bring in new quality. It also gives a place a lift. If you bring in better players, it raises the standard across the board, doesn't it?
Oh, of course it does, and I think that, as I've said, like, and I take nothing away from the work ethic in some of the players that are at the team just now. But Rodgers has come in and he said that he's looking to improve in quality, and we've probably had one successful market with that. But he knows that there's still areas that need to be strengthened. I think that, especially when we've got ourselves in such a strong position in Europe, such a strong position in the league as well, we're competing on all fronts domestically. I think that you need to then, strike like the iron's hot, as Celtic do. As I say, listen, I don't agree with yesterday's performance at all. Not anywhere near the quality we can play at. I think the stats in terms of attempts at goal yesterday shows it for what it was. But sometimes I think there's gold in these little moments, and halfway through a season, a nice moment of reflection for them as well. And yeah, just a nice time for the manager to say, right, this is exactly what I need to fix this. Because the system's not broke, in my opinion. It's not. It's the quality of the player.
Yeah, and I also think that you can keep the principles of the system that's been so successful, but you can tweak it. You can make small adjustments, and I have no doubt that the manager will be addressing that. He'll have had a sleepless night last night, and he'll have got up and gone to work this morning and done what he's good at.
He will have slept soundly last night, Tino.
He's still
Aye, he'll be fine. He'll be ready to give them all a rollicking today.
The thing is, for them, as we touched on, they'll need to watch that game back in full. Do, and I hope they sit through it and soak it up. And I think, we give the players so much credit when things are going well, and I don't, as much as they deserve criticism for yesterday, we don't see when it gets personal and all that nonsense online and stuff. That's madness, because these are the guys that have given us so much joy and so much success in recent times. Some have been here since Ange's time, some have Brendan Rodgers recruits, and I think I go back to this, and everyone can do what they want in terms of how they back their team, but our job overall is to support the team. That's our role as Celtic supporters. So be angry, be pissed off in the moment. That's all good. I think you also need to back guys that have given us a lot of joy in recent times. Paddy, the game at Ibrox was the first of 9 games that Celtic faced in January alone. You've touched on a couple of the biggies, and you'd certainly argue, I mean, here's a choice: lose at Ibrox and win v Young Boys, or the other way around. What are you taking?
Win v Young Boys in terms of continuing to go in Europe and looking at where the league positions at.
Yeah, and that's in Celtic's gift. So we play Young Boys on the 22nd, I'm sure, the 22nd of January. We then go to Villa Park a week later, and you hope that you go to Villa Park with the job done. But if you don't, then you've got another bite at the cherry. So I think in terms of Europe, we're in a great position. And to the point I've just made there, you need to give credit to the manager and the players for getting us there. You need to give. You can't criticise the guys who have 3 points yesterday and lose your mind, because it's the same guys that got you a 14-point lead. Not everything has changed there. And I think you need to just kind of find the balance with it. But as I say, we've got a challenging month ahead. We've got the Young Boys, the Villa game, and we've got Scottish Cup stuff into the mix and various other league games. So how does the manager approach this now? We'll do a preview tomorrow, start at some point for the St Mirren game at Parkhead on Sunday. But how does he approach it now? Do you respond to the noise and make wholesale changes? Stick with the guys that have been doing the job so far, somewhere in between? What do you think?
I think there will be some changes on Sunday, and so much so, obviously, that it's only a 72-hour turnaround. But I do think you might see Trusty coming back in, Alex Bailly coming back in, and just seeing what that does to the midfield. You'll also have to look at, is Arne Engels fit enough if he's not been well. But no, I don't think you want to take people out the firing line at this point. I think there'll be a few players that will want to go and try and right or wrong after the performance. So here's hoping to do. St Mirren will be still pretty confident. I know they get beat at the weekend, but they'll be pretty confident after the result against Rangers only a week ago. So they'll be up for it against us at Celtic Park. So it'll be a good game. But yeah, just go and show. Listen, we talk about the games against Rangers, they're important, but there's also another 34 games that we need to play and we need to show up in as well. Yeah,
and I think, as I mentioned earlier on in the piece, defeats will happen in football. Shock horror, team loses game of football. Happens to everybody, happens to the best teams, but it is how you respond. And I think it's important to see this response on Sunday against St Mirren. You get the same 3 points for beating St Mirren as beating Rangers, and I think Celtic have shown real serious consistency. now 19 league games, and we've won 16 of them, drawn 2 and lost just once. It is pretty decent, and I think, credit for that. Decent final comment from Pat McLaughlin saying that the only outfield players who started yesterday that haven't scored against Rangers are Alistair Johnson and Liam Scales, so there's plenty of expecting goals in that pitch. And he's right, that you can't just cast aside all these guys that have taken us so far. You can look at the bigger picture, and maybe you can debate that over the long term we need to replace Liam Scales and improve on him. We need to sort things out at left back in various other places. But these guys have done okay, and then some so far, and I think that's fair to say. Paddy, as I say, we'll bring another show on Saturday. We're still in that what day is it phase, aren't we? But we'll bring another show on Saturday ahead of the game on Sunday. But in the meantime, your own final thoughts on what played out at Ibrox?
Yeah, listen, I think that as fans that there will be upset with it, and there will be, looking back on the performance, looking at players that just didn't show up on the day. As you spoke about there, T, where we're at in this position already this season is enough perspective for me to make it think that it'll be okay. I understand. Listen, we've seen defeats at Ibrox before. We've taken them on the chin before, but I get why people are angry with the performance yesterday. I understand that. But this is where a manager is paid the money he's paid, and I've got every faith that he'll bring it back round and kind of bring us on to a strong run. We're famed for kicking on in January, as a lot of people have said in the last few seasons. So I've no doubts that the mood in the camp will start to pick up again. I'm hopeful that we act quick in the transfer market this month, rather than how we operated last year. I think that'll be a big sign that we've been doing our homework and that we're ready to go for what's going to be an exciting 5 months for Celtic fans.
Yeah, I think so too, Paddy. And I think, for example, if Kieran Tierney's going to happen, let's go and make it happen. If we've got a Ryan winger, let's go and get the winger. And let's go and get the guys in and give them a few weeks in January to get up to speed and kick on. I've been saying it for a number of weeks now. There's a potential for a really exciting and special season. The invincible stuff's gone, and that's fine. And it shows you just how difficult it can be to get through seasons invincible. But what is still, at this moment, a strong possibility, not just fantasy stuff, is a treble for Celtic and progress in the top competition in Europe. And I think there's plenty to be excited about there. Thanks for joining me here on a Friday afternoon. Thanks to everyone who continues to listen and support the Celtic Exchange podcast. As mentioned, we'll be back on Saturday with the preview for the St Mirren game. Keep an eye on our socials. We'll announce the times there. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Friday. We'll see you all again really soon.